Fort Sumner, New Mexico, July 14, 1881. The air is still, no lamp, no moon worth mentioning. Billy the Kid Bonnie cuts across the yard toward Pete Maxwell's bedroom, barefoot, carrying a butcher knife, hungry. He's done this 100 times. This is safe ground. He pushes through the door into the dark. He doesn't know that Pat Garrett is already inside, sitting on the edge of Maxwell's bed, gun drawn, waiting, back against the wall. Between the door and the window, the one position in that room where he'd see Billy before Billy saw him. He doesn't know that someone in this house told Garrett exactly where he'd be. He doesn't know that what's about to happen wasn't decided tonight. It was decided 2 years ago in a governor's office by a man who made a promise he never intended to keep. The question isn't how Billy the Kid died. The question is who decided he had to. To understand what happened in that room, you have to go back to March 1879. Billy rides into Lincoln under a secret arrangement with Governor Lew Wallace. Not as a prisoner, as an informant. Wallace needs a witness to the murder of attorney Houston Chapman, and Billy was there when it happened, forced at gunpoint to watch. So Wallace sends a message, come in, testify. And in return, Wallace writes the promise down. I will let you go scot-free with a pardon in your pocket. Billy keeps his end. He lets himself be arrested. He sits in a Lincoln jail cell. He testifies before the grand jury, gives names. Wallace gets exactly what he asked for. Then he waits. The pardon doesn't come. District Attorney William Reinerson refuses to drop the indictments against Billy. Not only that, he moves the trial down to La Mesilla, deep in hostile territory, where a conviction is practically guaranteed. Wallace says nothing, does nothing. Sharp words reportedly pass between Wallace and Reinerson, but nothing changes. Billy stays indicted, Reinerson wins, and the governor who made the deal is suddenly very quiet. Wallace wasn't just a governor caught between politics and principle. He was writing Ben-Hur in his spare time, angling for a diplomatic posting, and desperate to keep the territory quiet enough that Washington wouldn't notice the chaos. He was operating inside a system called the Santa Fe Ring, a web of lawyers, land speculators, judges, and territorial officials who had controlled New Mexico's courts, contracts, and cattle economy for over a decade. They decided who got indicted, who got acquitted, who got land grants, and who got nothing. Reinerson was part of it. So were the judges. So whether he admitted it or not, was Wallace. Billy was useful to the ring when he was willing to name names in a courtroom. Once that testimony was on the record, he wasn't useful anymore. He was a liability, a young man who knew too much with no protection and no institutional reason to stay quiet. So Billy waits in the Santa Fe jail. He writes Wallace 4 letters over 3 months. He asks Wallace to come see him. He reminds the governor of what was promised. He writes, I have done everything that I promised you I would, and you have done nothing that you promised me. Wallace never answers a single one. Then a reporter asks Wallace directly whether Billy might hang. Wallace says the chances seem good that May 13th would finish him. He doesn't sound troubled by the idea. Billy hears what Wallace said, and he stops waiting. April 28, 1881. The Lincoln Courthouse. Sheriff Garrett is out of town collecting taxes. Deputy Bob Ollinger takes 5 prisoners across the street for a meal, leaving Deputy James Bell alone with Billy. Billy asks to use the outhouse. On the way back up the stairs, he slips a hand out of his cuffs, swings the iron against Bell's skull, takes the man's revolver. Bell tries to run. Billy shoots him. Then he breaks into Garrett's office, takes Ollinger's loaded shotgun, and waits at the upstairs window. When Ollinger comes running at the sound of the shot, Billy calls down to him. Ollinger looks up. 2 shots. Done. Billy spends an hour prying off his leg irons with an axe, takes a horse, and rides out of Lincoln singing. Witnesses say they could hear him until he disappeared around the bend. He's free. But understand what free actually means in New Mexico in 1881, because the man now hunting him isn't just a sheriff. Pat Garrett was elected with Santa Fe Ring support. His job wasn't to bring Billy to trial. That ship had sailed. His job was removal, clean and permanent. For nearly 3 months, Billy survives by moving through a world the ring can't touch. Mexican ranching families, vaqueros, communities spread thin across the Pecos Valley who have no reason to love the territorial power structure and every reason to protect the young man who speaks their language, dances at their fiestas, and has never wronged them. Billy knows these roads. He knows which doors to knock on. The system hunting him is powerful, but it's Anglo, bureaucratic, slow, and Billy is none of those things. But Fort Sumner pulls him back. Pete Maxwell runs the old military fort like a small fiefdom, son of land Baron Lucian Maxwell, sitting on a land grant so large it had once been its own informal kingdom. Billy has history there, friends, and he has Paulita Maxwell, Pete's sister, with whom he's deeply involved. Maxwell watches this and says nothing, for a while. Because Billy's presence at Fort Sumner isn't just romantic, it's political. Every day Billy stays, Maxwell's own standing with the territorial structure is at risk. He's harboring a wanted man, a man the ring needs gone. The land grant, the contracts, the arrangements that keep Maxwell comfortable, all of it depends on being the right kind of neighbor to the right kind of people. So Maxwell talks to Garrett, not out of fear for his community, not out of civic duty. Pete Maxwell makes a calculation, the same calculation powerful men have always made, and Billy's life loses. Garrett arrives at Fort Sumner on the night of July 14th. He slips into Maxwell's bedroom. No lamp, one window. Maxwell lies in bed. Garrett sits at the edge, close enough to whisper, positioned with his back to the wall, between the door and the bed. They've been talking for hours when the floorboards outside shift. Billy comes through the door barefoot. He senses something. Two figures near the bed, hard to make out in the dark. Garrett fires twice. The first bullet enters Billy's chest just above the heart. The second misses and hits the wall. Billy drops. He doesn't speak again. 5 days later, Garrett rides to Santa Fe to collect his $500 bounty. Acting Governor William Rich refuses to pay. The territorial legislature won't authorize it for over a year. The system that built the trap, set the trap, and put Garrett inside that dark room won't even write the check. 4 unanswered letters, a promise written in ink, a body in the dirt at Fort Sumner. The deal was never going to hold. But Billy was the only one who didn't know that from the start. Billy wasn't outgunned, he was outmaneuvered by a political machine that made the deal, broke the deal, then sent a sheriff to finish what a pardon was supposed to prevent. The Santa Fe ring didn't need Billy in a courtroom anymore. They needed him in the ground, and they used everyone around him to put him there. A governor, a district attorney, a land baron's son with debts and ambitions. Every door closed a little tighter, and Billy walked through the last one barefoot, in the dark, without a chance. The man who pulled the trigger couldn't even collect his money without fighting the same machine he served. If you've ever been told Billy the Kid was just an outlaw who ran out a road, now you know better. Check out the video below to uncover more real truths from the Wild West.